Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night to everyone. Did you know that one of the best stories in the Star Wars universe isn't in the movies, the books, or the shows, but in a video game you might have never even played? Not long ago, I had a conversation with a colleague at work. She was never a huge Star Wars fan. She had seen the main episodes, but according to her, mostly in passing. And episodes like 8 and 9 she had watched half-heartedly at home, which, honestly, might have been for the best. And then, for reasons I still can't quite explain, she suddenly decided to watch Andor. And according to her, the moment she finished the first season, she immediately started the second. She was blown away. She called Andor more mature, and let's be real, you could tell this show was made with care. So when she asked what else she should explore, I did what any proper nerd would do. I dropped a whole list of recommendations. And yep, games were on that list too. To which she replied something like, video games? They can tell better stories than movies? Aren't they just like, games? Honestly, it's not the first time I've heard that, and I still don't get where that assumption comes from. But I've gotten used to answering. If we are talking about story-driven games, not puzzle apps or match 3 clones, then yes, some of them absolutely do tell better stories than movies, books, or even theater. Because you're not just watching, you are participating. And when it comes to role-playing games, it goes even further. Because it is you who makes the choices, you shape the story, and your decisions come with consequences. That kind of engagement just hits different. Of course, not all games are created equal, just like not all books or movies are great. But since we are talking about Star Wars, there's one game. And its name is Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords. To this day, I still believe it's the most profound Star Wars story ever told. No movie, no series, or any book has ever resonated with me the same way. And it's that good not just because of its characters or its writing, but because of how deeply it explores the Force itself, its philosophy and its meaning. That game is just different. It's darker, more introspective. Honestly, the writing in that game is so sharp and so layered that after finishing it, you could probably apply for a degree in philosophy. But that game, as brilliant as it is, builds on the foundation laid by the first part. And that's where this video comes in. So, this video is an introduction to the Old Republic, a Star Wars timeline so rich and expansive it can stand toe-to-toe with the main saga or even the New Republic era from the Old Legends canon. It all started back in 2003 with the release of the first part of Knights of the Old Republic. Yes, the game is old, maybe older than some of you watching this. Yes, the visuals and gameplay have aged, but the story, it still holds up. And you can still experience what made it so special. The worlds, the choices, the characters, and that unmistakable Star Wars spirit. So before we dive in, here's a little context. The events of Knights of the Old Republic take place roughly 4,000 years before the rise of the Empire, long before the Skywalkers or the Clone Wars. The first part tells the story of a large-scale galactic conflict known as the Jedi Civil War. And that's the story I am going to tell here. And yes, technically this is a retelling of a video game story, but not in the go here, grab that kind of way. I wanted to do something more narrative driven, something closer to an audiobook, because no matter how hard I tried, I could never convince my colleague at work to actually play the game herself. So I thought, why not adapt it into something like a bedtime story, something she could simply listen to and watch instead of spending dozens of hours playing it. And one more thing, since it's a role-playing game, the main character is essentially faceless because the player chooses their sex, appearance, and personality. But in this version, I'll be telling the story from the point of view that reflects my own interpretation, the way I personally imagine this journey, and the choices I see as canon. This video is just the first part of that retelling, and I decided to split it into 3 episodes. First, because it is, let's call it, an experiment. I want to see how well this kind of video format works. Second, the game is long, and most people I talked to said they would rather watch it in 1-hour segments than sit through a full 3-hour video. And if I ever get to the second game, oh well, 5 hours might not even be enough. So splitting it up is inevitable, whether I like it or not. So, now that I have rambled on long enough explaining everything, make yourself comfortable, and I hope you enjoy the video. There was a time when Taris was considered a jewel of the Outer Rim, a thriving metropolis that was often compared to Coruscant. But as new hyperspace routes emerged, its glory faded and the world slowly fell into decline. Yet, in the year 3956 before Battle of Yavin, the skies above this decaying cityscape became the stage for an event that would alter the course of the Jedi Civil War. The Republic cruiser Andor Spire, engaged in a covert mission, was violently wrenched from hyperspace by the Sith warship Leviathan. The ambush had a singular purpose: the capture of Bastila Shan, a young Jedi Knight whose abilities could turn the tide of the war. Sith boarding parties stormed the vessel, cutting through its defenses with ruthless efficiency. Amidst the chaos, a Republic soldier awoke in his quarters, jolted from unconsciousness by the blaring alarm and the distant echoes of blaster fire. Disoriented and aching, he struggled to make sense of the chaos unraveling beyond the walls. He had barely gathered his bearings when the cabin door burst open, revealing Ensign Trask Ulgo. The officer wasted no time, thrusting a weapon into his fellow soldier's hands and ordering him to follow. There was no time for hesitation. Their objective: reach the bridge and aid in repelling the Sith invaders. As they fought their way through the corridors, Trask noted how his newfound comrade handled himself in battle. Unshaken, precise, moving with an ease that suggested experience beyond that of a mere soldier. But when they finally reached the bridge, it was empty. No officers, no captain, and no sign of Bastila Shan. It was then that Trask made a grim deduction. The crew must have already begun evacuating. If the Sith were here for Bastila, the Andor Spire was doomed the moment she left. Their suspicions were confirmed when a voice crackled over the comm.
This is Carth Onasi on your personal communicator. I'm tracking your position through the Andor Spire's life support systems. Bastila's escape pod is away. You're the last surviving crew member on the Andor Spire. Now, I can't wait for you much longer. You have to get to the escape pods.
With no other option, Trask and his companions set their sights on the escape pods. But fate had other plans. As they made their way through the ship, a shadow emerged, a dark Jedi blocking their path. Trask understood immediately. They would not both escape. With a sharp command to keep moving, he sealed the blast door behind him and turned to face the Sith alone. Now on his own, the Republic soldier pushed forward, cutting through Sith troopers in a desperate bid to reach the escape pods. At the docking bay, Carth was waiting, the last surviving crew member aboard the Andor Spire. There was no time for questions. Together they launched themselves from the dying ship, plunging toward the planet below. The crash landing was brutal, but against all odds, they survived. Carth carried his unconscious comrade from the wreckage, finding refuge in an abandoned apartment on the streets of Upper City. While the soldier lay unconscious, a dream took hold of him, vivid, haunting, like a vision. Amid smoke and flickering light, he saw a young Jedi, locked in a desperate duel with a Sith. Faces were blurred, voices distorted, but the moment seared itself into his mind. The clash felt familiar, as if it belonged to a life he had never lived. Even in sleep, something was trying to reach him, or perhaps awaken him. Outside, the city stretched like a dying neon labyrinth. Towering spires flickered under a polluted sky, and speeders buzzed between platforms as if nothing had happened. Taris kept breathing, indifferent to the war above. When the soldier finally stirred, Carth was there to greet him, his tone both relieved and cautious.
Good to see you up instead of thrashing about in your sleep. You must have been having one hell of a nightmare. I was wondering if you were ever going to wake up. I'm Carth, one of the Republic soldiers from the Andor Spire. I was with you in the escape pod. Do you remember?
The news was grim. The Sith had established an iron grip over Taris, locking the planet under a full blockade. Search teams were combing every level of the city, hunting for Bastila Shan. Worse still, reports suggested that several escape pods had fallen into the depths of the Undercity, a lawless slum where only the desperate and the outcast dared to tread. As Carth brought him up to speed, the Republic soldier listened in silence, his mind clouded and unfocused. The crash had taken its toll. He couldn't remember much, not even his own name. Trying to recall it felt like reaching through fog. After a moment, gathering what strength he could, he looked at Carth, gave a small nod of gratitude for saving him, and finally spoke his name, Avner. Carth nodded, though a flicker of concern crossed his face. Whatever this man's past had been, soldier, spy, something more, none of it mattered now. He needed help. And for now, Avner was the only ally he had. Carth answered his questions and gave him a brief rundown of the current state of the galaxy. The war between the Republic and Darth Revan's Sith Empire had raged for 3 long years. The Republic, still weakened from the recent invasion of the Neo-Crusaders, struggled to hold its ground against this new and relentless threat. But the most alarming fact was that Darth Revan had once been a Jedi Knight. During the Mandalorian invasion, Revan and his close friend Alec had answered the Republic's call for aid, determined to stand against the bloodthirsty conquerors. Despite the Jedi Council's prohibition, they secretly, and later openly, recruited like-minded followers from the academies on Coruscant, Dantooine, and Taris. Breaking from the Order, they took to the front lines, where Revan and Malak led the Republic's forces to a string of decisive victories. By 3962, before the Battle of Yavin, the Supreme Chancellor named Revan the Republic's Supreme Commander. Now holding near absolute authority, he threw all his efforts into a ruthless campaign against the Mandalorians. Battle after battle, Revan and his followers grew ever more consumed by their fury, adopting the enemy's own brutal methods of war. The Jedi Council, having lost all influence over the situation, watched with growing unease as Revan's strategies, though undeniably effective, became increasingly merciless. 2 years later, Revan's tactical brilliance, along with the unwavering loyalty of his officers and the admiration of the Republic's soldiers, turned the tide of the war. The Mandalorians suffered a crushing defeat at the climactic Battle of Malachor V. When Revan and Malak returned victorious, the Republic hailed them as saviors of the galaxy, but the war had changed them beyond recognition. Revan's victory even forced the Jedi High Council to question their past decisions, but in the end, they decreed that the revanchists must answer for their actions in a trial on Coruscant. Instead, Revan and Malak, along with a significant portion of the Republic's fleet, vanished into the unknown regions under the pretense of hunting down the remnants of the Mandalorian Armada. No one knew what had become of them during this time, but 1 year later, in 3959, the lost heroes returned, not as protectors, but as conquerors. Under the banners of the Sith, Revan and Malak launched an invasion of the Republic, seeking to overthrow the Jedi Order and the corrupt Senate that had abandoned so many worlds to the Mandalorian scourge. For many of Revan's former comrades, resentment toward the Republic and the Jedi had been festering for years. The Order's authority had been shattered. The Senate had proven itself incapable of protecting the galaxy without the aid of the Jedi. As a result, most of the Republic's soldiers left behind in known space followed their former commander without hesitation, pledging themselves to the cause of the revanchist Sith. Revan's Sith Empire struck with precision, targeting key locations in the Outer Rim. Unlike past Sith warlords, he did not seek wanton destruction. Instead, he sought to seize infrastructure intact, ensuring a swift consolidation of power. Entire worlds surrendered without a fight, and his agents sowed doubt among the Republic's ranks, persuading even Jedi Knights to defect. The Sith Empire surged forward, driving ever deeper into Republic space. Faced with these overwhelming victories, morale within the Republic's military plummeted. Countless soldiers who had once fought against the Sith now defected to their side. Among them was Admiral Sol Karath, a decorated war hero and the former mentor of Garth Onasi. Under Karath's command, the Sith achieved a string of devastating victories. His betrayal was a dagger to the heart of the Republic. Officers who once saluted him in battle drills now marched under Revan's banners. Even Karth, his protégé, could barely speak of the man without bitterness. By 3957, before the Battle of Yavin, the Republic stood on the brink of collapse. Its fleets were losing battles across every front, and with each passing day, more Jedi and soldiers joined the Sith. The tide began to shift, however, with the emergence of Bastila Shan. Her unique ability, Battle Meditation, became a beacon of hope, bolstering the Republic's forces and turning the tide in key engagements. Battle Meditation was a rare and formidable Force technique. By immersing herself fully in the currents of the Force, Bastila could sense every soldier on the battlefield, their movements, fears, and resolve, and subtly influence the flow of combat. Under its effect, the Republic's troops felt united and unstoppable, their morale surging, while the enemy faltered, gripped by doubt and hesitation. Yet, despite these hard-fought victories, the Republic's long-term survival was uncertain. Years of unrelenting warfare had drained its resources, while the Sith war machine seemed inexhaustible. The Jedi Council knew even Bastila's battle meditation would not be enough. Only the elimination of the Dark Lord himself could change the course of the war. In 3957, Republic intelligence secured Sith security codes, enabling the Jedi to set a trap. Revan, hoping to turn Bastila to his cause, was lured into the Outer Rim, where a strike team led by Bastila boarded his flagship and confronted the Dark Lord. At that very moment, Darth Malak, seizing the opportunity to claim power for himself, ordered his forces to fire on Revan's ship. The bombardment mortally wounded Revan, and Bastila barely escaped the devastation. With Revan gone, Malak ascended as the new Dark Lord of the Sith, proclaiming himself the undisputed ruler of the Sith Empire. But despite the Jedi Council's belief that they had struck a decisive blow, the consequences of their mission proved disastrous for the Republic. Unlike Revan, who had sought to preserve infrastructure and bring order through conquest, Malak sought to build his empire upon the ashes of the old. Lacking his predecessor's strategic mind, he compensated with sheer brutality. Entire star systems burned as Malak's forces unleashed widespread orbital bombardments, reducing once thriving worlds to lifeless wastelands. The war, rather than ending, became even bloodier. Realizing that Malak's war machine seemed limitless, Bastila Shan and a select group of Jedi were assigned to uncover the source of the Sith's rapid fleet replenishment. Karth Onasi, now a battle-hardened veteran of 2 wars and still reeling from Sol Karath's betrayal, took his place among the crew of the Endar Spire. Lord Malak, obsessed with eliminating Bastila, set his agents upon her trail. Learning of her mission, he orchestrated an ambush near Taris. The events that followed, Avner already knew. Taking stock of the situation, they reached a clear conclusion. The blockade was still in place. The Sith remained unaware of Bastila's whereabouts, and there was no time to waste. They had to begin the search immediately.
Good idea. We can use this abandoned apartment as a base. We can probably get some equipment and supplies here in the upper city. Just remember to keep a low profile.
The 2 Republic soldiers started combing the upper city streets. It soon became apparent that most escape pods had crashed into the lower levels, but access there was heavily restricted. Avner, ever resourceful, managed to extract the necessary information from a checkpoint officer, learning exactly what documents were required to pass through. As they made their way back to their hideout to plan their next move, fortune smiled upon them. They stumbled upon a Sith patrol mid-interrogation of a local resident in a neighboring apartment. Karth advised against drawing attention, but the 2 soldiers couldn't stand by and watch. A quick and decisive skirmish ended with the Sith squad lying lifeless at their feet. The rescued man, grateful for their intervention, revealed that he belonged to one of the 2 major lower city gangs and suggested they seek out his leader for assistance. Disguising themselves in the armor of the fallen Sith soldiers, Avner and Karth managed to bluff their way past the security checkpoints and descend into the depths of Taris. The lower city welcomed them with darkness and danger. Barely had they taken a few steps before a group of armed thugs tried to corner them. When the blaster smoke cleared, their bodies sprawled where they'd fallen, steam rising from fresh wounds. They had barely stepped inside Cantina when violence found them again, but this time it wasn't their own. In a flash of motion, a lone mercenary gunned down 3 approaching gunmen with uncanny precision. His blasters moved faster than the eye could follow, each shot lethal, effortless. The thugs never stood a chance. Around the room, no one reacted. It was as if scenes like this were just part of the ambiance. They moved carefully through the crowd, asking questions in low voices. One of the regulars, eyeing their gear and the way they moved, finally offered a name. Gaydon Thek, a gang leader still standing in a city where everything else was falling apart. He gave them directions to an old maintenance door behind a scrapyard. If they were serious, that's where they'd find him. Gaydon told them the truth. Bastila had survived the crash, but not without consequence. She was being held by the Black Vulkars, a rival gang with no interest in ransom or diplomacy. They intended to parade her like a trophy, bound and helpless, in front of the lowest scum in the lower city. Her fate would be decided in an illegal swoop race, where the prize wasn't credits, but the right to own her. The only way to save her was to win. Gaydon offered them a way forward. He would sponsor Avner in the race, but only if they could retrieve a stolen prototype swoop engine, without which victory was impossible. To pull it off, they'd need the help of a street-smart thief, Mission Vow, a teenage Twi'lek who knew the Vulkar stronghold like the back of her hand. Having no other leads to follow, Avner and Karth agreed to his terms. Gathering their resolve, they descended once more into the dark and dangerous streets of the lower city, where every shadow could hide an enemy. While searching for mission in the back alleys of the lower city, they crossed paths with Canderous Ordo, a Warsguard Mandalorian now serving as muscle for the crime lord Davik Kang. With the air of a man who'd seen too much to care, he mentioned offhand that he'd seen the girl slip into the Undercity, ancient ruins riddled with disease, darkness, and horrors that no sane man willingly faced. With no better lead, Avner and Karth pressed on, descending into the city's bowels. The depths of Taris were worse than the rumors, swallowed in shadows, stinking of mold and rot, and crawling with grotesque half-feral beasts. But before they could be overwhelmed, Mission Vow found them. Her closest friend, a mighty Wookiee named Zalbar, had been taken by slavers. Desperation flashed in her eyes as she pleaded for help. Karth agreed on one condition: she would help them steal the engine in return.
Do you know where he's being kept?
The Gamorreans make their camps in the sewers. I bet that's where we'll find Zalbar. And that's where I'll show you the secret entrance into the Vulkar compound.
Together, they tracked the slavers through the damp, claustrophobic tunnels and struck fast. In the chaos of battle, Avner moved like a blade in motion, silent, precise, unstoppable. When the last slaver fell, Zalbar was freed. He, without hesitation, swore a life debt to Avner, binding his fate to the soldier who had saved him. With the Wookiee at their side, Mission kept her promise. As they navigated the sewers, Karth found himself scrutinizing his companion with growing suspicion. Though Avner was neither the highest ranking nor the most experienced among them, he had naturally assumed the role of leader. Karth, having suffered betrayal twice, once at the hands of Jedi Revan and again by his mentor, Saul Karath, had learned to expect treachery. Karth kept telling himself, he's too calm, too good, and that's never a good sign. A man like that always had something to hide. He even voiced his doubts, speculating that perhaps it was Avner's presence that had led the Sith to them in the first place.
I'm probably wrong, and this is probably nothing, I know. I learned a long time ago not to take things at face value ever, and I hate surprises. Look, it has nothing to do with you personally. I don't trust anyone, and I have my reasons. And no, I'm not going to discuss them, so can we just keep our mind on more important things?
But the certainty behind his doubts began to erode. Deep within the Volker base, Avner had been offered a shortcut, betray Gaiden Thek, and skip the hard way in. He refused. That moment, more than any words, told Karth what he needed to know. With the stolen engine secured, they returned victorious to the hidden Becks. Gaidon, clearly impressed, extended a personal invitation. Avner would ride in the race. And he did, straddling a finely tuned swoop bike, instincts honed like a blade. The crowd roared as the swoop engines ignited, their thunder rolling through the packed arena. Avner tightened his grip, eyes fixed ahead. One mistake could cost him more than the race. The competition didn't stand a chance. In a blur of speed and adrenaline, he crossed the finish line first. In that instant, the race was over. Victory was his, and so was Bastila's freedom. But Bastila was no helpless captive. She had been biding her time, waiting for the right moment. In an instant, she lashed out with the Force, wrenching a weapon from a guard's hands and turning it against her captors. Blaster bolts flew, bodies dropped, and when the smoke cleared, only she and Avner stood. She turned to him. Her stance stiffened, bracing for another fight, but recognition flickered across her face. Surprise, relief, 100 unspoken questions in her gaze.
Wait, I don't believe this. You're one of the soldiers with the Republic fleet, aren't you? Yes, I'm sure of it. How did you end up racing for these swoop gangs?
She demanded to know how he had found her, how he had survived. Avner, ever composed, simply said he hadn't done it alone. He owed it to Karth and to a few unlikely allies they'd met along the way. The name made her pause. So Karth Onasi had survived. A flicker of something, relief perhaps, softened the steel in her shoulders. She nodded once and asked to be taken to him. But as she turned away, Avner noticed her lingering glance. Curious, searching, as if trying to remember something. Karth and the others were waiting at their hideout, and for the first time in days, the haunted look behind his eyes began to fade. Somehow, against all odds, they had done it. It had taken them less than 3 days to find and free the lost Jedi Knight. But despite being a Jedi Knight and a key figure in the war, Bastila carried herself with an air of superiority. She clashed with Karth, chastising him for his failure to prepare a proper escape plan, dismissed Mission as nothing more than a petulant child, and outright refused to admit that she had needed Avner's help. Tension sparked like static in the air. Even Zalbar shifted uneasily.
Now that I'm back in charge of this mission, perhaps we can start doing things properly. Hopefully our escape from Taris will go more smoothly than when you rescued me from Brejik.
I know you're new at this, Bastila, but a leader doesn't berate her troops just because things aren't going as planned. Don't let your ego get in the way of the real issues here.
That hardly strikes me as an appropriate way of addressing your commander, Karth. I am a member of the Jedi Order, and this is my mission. Don't forget that.
But Avner managed to defuse the conflict, reminding them that now was not the time for petty disputes. If they wanted to leave Taris alive, they had to work together. Begrudgingly, Bastila conceded his point, and since the Sith were actively hunting her, she reluctantly ceded leadership to her unlikely savior. Before long, an unexpected visitor arrived at their hideout, an envoy bearing an invitation from an old acquaintance, the mercenary Canderous Ordo. Intrigued, Avner, Karth, and Bastila made their way to the cantina to meet him. Canderous, a hardened veteran of 40 years, had seen enough planetary blockades to know how they usually ended. With the Sith tightening their grip on the planet and his own employer, Davik Kang, drowning in debt, he saw an opportunity to solve both problems at once. His proposal was straightforward. Avner, who had already proven his resourcefulness by stealing the prototype swoop engine and rescuing Bastila, would infiltrate the Sith base and secure the security clearance codes. Meanwhile, Canderous would use his connections to smuggle them into Davik's stronghold. and from there, the team would fight their way to the hangar and steal the Ebon Hawk, one of the fastest ships in the Outer Rim, capable of outrunning any Sith pursuit. Bastila and Karth balked at the plan, calling it reckless.
This is too risky. We should find another way.
You got another plan, sister? Or are you just objecting because you didn't think of it?
No, I don't have another plan. I would rather not place my life in your hands, however.
But Avner thought otherwise. With the credits he had won from the swoop race, he purchased T3M4, a state-of-the-art astromech droid with advanced slicing capabilities, exactly what they needed to breach the Sith security. Striking under the cover of night, they launched a surprise assault on the Sith headquarters. With Bastila's battle meditation enhancing their combat prowess, they tore through the defenses in mere minutes, cut down the Tarisian governor, and retrieved the clearance codes from his lifeless body. As they hurried to rendezvous with Canderous, Avner confided in Bastila about a strange vision, one that had haunted him since the crash. He had seen her, locked in combat with a dark warrior aboard a ship he did not recognize. Bastila fell silent, her mind racing. The vision could mean only one thing. Avner had witnessed her duel with Darth Revan moments before his demise. There was no other explanation. He was Force-sensitive. His dreams, his uncanny instincts, his rapid growth, all of it pointed to a power beyond mere luck. As they neared their destination, Bastila, still deep in thought, hesitated before asking, did he see anything else? But Avner shook his head. Saying nothing more, Bastila walked the rest of the way in silence. High above the city, aboard the looming Sith command ship, Darth Malak gazed out over the skyline, his patience wearing thin. Days of fruitless searching had passed, and still Bastila Shan remained beyond his grasp, and the Dark Lord of the Sith would not tolerate failure much longer.
You summoned me, Lord Malak.
The search for Bastila is taking too long. We cannot risk her escaping Taris. Destroy the entire planet.
The entire planet, Lord Malak? But there are billions of people on Taris. We'd be slaughtering countless innocent civilians, not to mention our own men still on the surface.
But millions of innocent lives, along with countless Sith troops stationed on the surface, were, in his eyes, a small price to pay to ensure Bastila's destruction. Admiral Sol Karath, his trusted commander and Karth Onasi's former mentor, acknowledged the command with a grim nod. He reported that the fleet would need a few hours to position itself for the strike. Meanwhile, in the shadowed underbelly of the city, Avner, Karth, Bastila, Mission, Zalbar, and T3M4 followed Canderous to Davik's estate. Posing as mercenaries eager to join the exchange, they earned temporary access to the stronghold. Once inside, they bided their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came swiftly. Fighting their way through Davik's guards, they reached the hangar where the Ebon Hawk awaited, but their deception had not gone unnoticed. Above, the sky turned crimson. The Sith bombardment had begun. Turbolaser fire from the orbiting flagship rained down with merciless precision, pulverizing entire districts in seconds. Towers shattered like glass, their remains swallowed by firestorms. Shockwaves rippled through the city as the upper levels of Taris crumbled under the barrage, collapsing like brittle ash. Inside the trembling estate, there was no room left for diplomacy, only survival. A brutal confrontation erupted. Davik Kang fought with ruthless precision, wielding advanced tech and a disruptor rifle capable of melting Dura steel. At his side stood Kelo Nord, silent, lethal, and clad in heavy battle armor, whose twin blasters spat death faster than the eye could follow. Avner and Bastila moved as one, blades flashing, parrying every strike, reading each other's rhythm like a battle-honed dance. Canderous took the fight to Bounty Hunter, the floor shaking with each thunderous blast from his cannon. Sparks and shattered tiles flew in every direction. Davik fell first. A precise, coordinated strike from Avner and Bastila brought him down. Kalo raised his blasters, ready to strike back, but he never got the chance. The estate shuddered violently as a final salvo from above struck home. Stone, steel, and flame crashed down in a tidal wave of ruin. Kalo was buried beneath a mountain of rubble, his vendetta silenced beneath the fire of the Sith. With the blockade tightening around them, there was no time to waste. Using the stolen security codes, Karth's expert piloting, and Avner's unerring precision at the turbolaser battery, they tore a hole through the enemy fleet and jumped to hyperspace. Taris burned behind them, and ahead waited Dantooine, peaceful, remote, and far from the chaos of the galaxy.
Dantooine. It seems like a lifetime since I last set foot on her surface. Though in truth, it's only been a few months. We should be safe from Malak here. For now, at least.
Safe? You saw what his fleet did to Taris. There wasn't a building over 2 stories high left standing. They turned the planet into one big pile of rubble.
Even the Sith would think twice before attacking Dantooine. There are many Jedi here, including several of the most powerful Masters of the Order. There is great strength within this place. Now I must go speak with the Council. I need their advice on recent developments. After I've met with them, I will meet you outside the ship.
Upon arrival, Bastila wasted no time. She presented their findings to the Jedi Council. Taris had fallen, and she and Avner had shared the same vision, one that pointed to Revan and Malak searching for something of great power. The Council was wary. This Republic soldier, this stranger, remained an enigma. Some doubted his potential, others feared what he might become. But Bastila was resolute. She reminded them that she had once defeated a Sith Lord, and in Avner she sensed a rare gift, something the Force itself had awakened. After long deliberation, the Council relented. Avner would be trained in the ways of the Jedi. While his fate hung in the balance, he walked the quiet halls of the Enclave. He spoke with Karth about the horrors of war, comforted Mission as she grieved for her lost home, and spent long hours in reflection. And in the end, he made his choice. He would walk the path of the Jedi. For weeks, Avner trained with unwavering focus. His progress stunned even the Masters, a bond unlike any the Council had seen form between him and Bastila, one that transcended combat. Where once there was distrust, now there was respect, and perhaps something deeper. They trained together, fought together, and spent what little free time they had in each other's company, discussing the war and what lay ahead. Sometimes they argued about the Jedi Code, about the cost of war, but it was in those disagreements that their respect grew. In Avner, Bastila found not just a student, but an equal, someone who challenged her, yet never tried to overshadow her. The Council was astounded. What should have taken years, Avner mastered in less than 2 months. When the time came, he constructed his own lightsaber. Now, together with Bastila, and those who had stood by him since Taris, he was ready to join the war against Darth Malak's Sith Empire.
I am honored to welcome you fully into the Jedi Order.
The dark side is strong in this place. I can feel its power. Is this wise? The ancient Jedi sealed this archway. If we pass beyond this door, we can never go back. The Order will surely banish us. Are the secrets of the Star Forge so valuable? Can its power truly be worth the risk?
While the Jedi Council struggled to interpret yet another vision shared by Bastila and Avner, they sent the pair to investigate the ancient grove of Dantooine, once a place of meditation and peace for the Jedi. But recently, troubling reports had begun to emerge. Animals had grown restless and aggressive, and local farmers spoke of whispers in the mist and shadows flitting between the trees. The Council feared the grove had been tainted by the influence of the dark side. As Avner moved cautiously through the fog-shrouded forest, accompanied by Canderous and Mission, he felt a sudden disturbance in the Force, as if nature itself recoiled at the presence of something twisted. His instincts were right. Deep within the heart of the grove, among moss-covered roots and jagged stone, they found her, a Cathar woman, eyes blazing with fury, her lightsaber igniting in a crimson flash. She attacked without hesitation. The duel was fierce but brief. Wounded and clutching her side, the Cathar glared at her opponent and asked bitterly what he wanted from her. But Avner, sensing the turmoil within her, asked only one question. What is her name? Her name was Juhani. Once she had been a Padawan of the Jedi Enclave. She came from Taris, where her family had fled after the massacre on Cathar. From childhood, she had known only suffering and humiliation. The Mandalorians had killed her father during the Siege of Taris. Her mother perished in poverty, crushed under debts to a criminal syndicate. Juhani herself had been sold into slavery, and even then she swore that one day she would become a Jedi. To her, the Jedi were more than saviors. They were mythic figures, champions of justice, and it was the Jedi Knight Revan, the hero who had freed her during the Mandalorian Wars, who inspired her to follow the path of the Force. Her sensitivity to it was discovered soon after, and she came to Dantooine full of hope, where she was taken in by Master Quattro. But the anger she carried from her past never truly left her. During her final trial, Master Quattro allowed Juhani to face her in a duel, knowing she was emotionally unstable. Overcome with rage, Juhani believed she had struck her master down in anger. Overwhelmed by guilt and shame, she fled into the grove, convinced she had fallen to the dark side. The ideals she once believed in, her faith, her purpose, all lay in ruins. The Council had sent others to find her, but every effort had failed. Juhani used the Force, now twisted by her pain, to hide herself from even her former peers.
Kill me now while you still have the power.
But Avner did not raise his blade. He saw not an enemy, but a soul broken by pain and lost along the way. Though still only a Padawan, newly accepted into the Order, his words about the Force, about choice, about how even those who fall can find their way back to the light if they are willing to let go of the past, planted a seed of hope in Juhani's heart. Perhaps the Council might forgive her. In the end, Avner convinced her to return to the Enclave, believing that Juhani deserved a second chance. And so, one lost soul returned to the light, not through force, but through compassion.
I thank you, Master Jedi. I will return to the Council then. I shall submit myself to their judgment and hope they will forgive me. Again, I thank you. I am sure I will hear great things about you in the future.
As he watched her walk away, something stirred beneath the calm surface of Avner's thoughts, a quiet understanding of what it truly meant to be a Jedi. It wasn't victory or strength that defined the light, but mercy and the courage to believe that even the fallen could rise again. While searching for Juhani, Avner and Canderous came across a shaken farmer who begged for justice. His wife and child had been slaughtered by a band of Mandalorian mercenaries. Without hesitation, they followed the trail into the nearby hills, where they found the killers resting by a campfire, boasting of their latest hunt. Canderous, once a proud Neo-Crusader, watched them from the shadows. There was no glory here, only butchery, no discipline, no code, just thugs, cloaked in the armor of a warrior's legacy. His jaw clenched with restrained fury. This was not the Mandalorian way he had fought for. This was rot, decay. Saying he would enjoy killing them, Canderous and Avner struck. The skirmish was swift but brutal. When the last mercenary fell, Canderous studied his companion for a brief moment. Avner had proven his worth in battle once more, and the old warrior took notice. Watching him fight, Canderous was reminded of a long-forgotten battlefield, and of a Jedi who had once left a mark on a Mandalorian, Jedi Knight Revan. Both Bastila and the Council were pleased with Avner's success, and his decision to help Juhani redeem herself only strengthened their trust in him. However, the presence of the dark side still lingered. Juhani spoke of ancient ruins near the grove where she had been hiding, and the revelation caught the Council by surprise. No record of such a structure existed. Determined to uncover its secrets, they sent Avner and Bastila to investigate. Upon reaching the ruins, the two immediately recognized the eerie, time-worn structure from their visions. Bastila suspected that this was the very place where Revan and Malak had begun their descent into darkness. Inside, they discovered a long-dormant droid caretaker, which introduced itself as a product of the Star Forge, an immense construct built by the ancient Rakata Empire. The droid had been created nearly 30,000 years ago, at the height of the Infinite Empire's power, to oversee the construction of a monument to the Star Forge. Once the task was complete, all slaves involved in the project had been executed, and the droid had been reprogrammed to serve any Rakata who might visit the temple. Yet, in the 25,000 years that followed, not a single builder had returned. Then, in 3959 before Battle of Yavin, mere weeks before the Jedi Civil War began, Darth Revan and Darth Malak had arrived at these very ruins, seeking the Star Forge. They had undergone a series of trials, and in the end, had unlocked access to a relic known as the Star Map. Avner and Bastila resolved to follow in their footsteps. Facing the same challenges, they proved themselves worthy and reached the heart of the ancient temple, where they uncovered the Star Map. But their discovery was not what they had hoped. Instead of revealing the exact location of the Star Forge, the map pointed to fragments scattered across 4 distant worlds.
See this world here? This looks like Korriban, a Sith world. And if that's Korriban, then this is Kashyyyk, and Tatooine, and Hizmanan. But there are pieces missing. Incomplete hyperspace coordinates, corrupted data, and there doesn't seem to be anything indicating where the Star Forge itself might be. This map can't take us to the Star Forge, but I know that Revan and Malak visited Korriban at least once. Perhaps they discovered something more there. They may have found something on each of the other worlds that completed this map. Maybe if we find all the pieces, they'll lead us to the Starforge, and some way to destroy it. We must inform the Council of what we've discovered. They must decide our next course of action, though I suspect our task has only just begun.
The Jedi wasted no time in reporting their findings to the Council, and to Avner and his companion's surprise, the Council had suddenly entrusted the mission of recovering the maps not to a Jedi Master, but to a mere Padawan and Bastila. The reasoning behind this decision was simple. Sending a group of Jedi Masters or members of the Council would draw the Sith's attention like a beacon, but Avner, Bastila, and the crew of the Ebon Hawk could move through the galaxy quietly, following the trail of the Sith Lords without alerting Malak's agents, and perhaps find the secret of his infinite fleet before it was too late. No one took this news worse than Karth. He could not understand why the fate of the Republic was being placed in the hands of an untested apprentice and a Jedi who should have been on the front lines, using her battle meditation to aid the war effort. He confided in Avner that something felt off. He could sense that the Council was keeping secrets from them.
I may not know much about the Jedi, but I do know they aren't famous for taking on old Padawans and sending them on dangerous assignments. You're a neophyte Padawan who's been saddled with the responsibility of tracking down these star maps. Why? That's not normal. I am not trying to provoke you or to imply that you're somehow responsible for the Jedi Council, but give me a hand here. There has to be a reason.
That is none of your concern, Karth, and you would do well to leave the matter be.
I respect you, Bastila, but you've been as closed-mouthed as the rest of the Council. If you won't talk to me, then maybe somebody else will.
Regardless of his doubts, Karth's desire to confront Sol Karath burned brighter than any misgivings he held, and so he chose to stay aboard the Ebon Hawk, standing by Avner's side for whatever lay ahead. Not long after, Juhani rejoined them as well. The Jedi Council, impressed by her willingness to atone and Avner's faith in her, had granted her leave to accompany the crew. Quietly and without ceremony, she stepped aboard the ship, not as an outcast, but as an ally. And so, their journey began on a distant sun-scorched world, the desert planet of Tatooine.
Lord Malak, the Starforge is operating at 200% capacity, far beyond our expectations.
I am more interested in the young Jedi Bastila and her battle meditation. Have you learned how she escaped the destruction of Taris?
She was aided by Karth Onasi, a decorated war hero of the Republic and a legendary soldier. During the Mandalore Wars, he was honored many times for his bravery.
You know this man?
Yes, Lord Malak. He served under me when I still followed the Republic. You could say I was his mentor.
Interesting. How did you acquire this information, Admiral?
An eyewitness, Lord Malak. Calo Nord, a bounty hunter, was there when Bastila and Karth escaped the planet. Apparently they left him for dead.
A Jedi and a war hero. It's a wonder you survived the encounter.
I am hard to kill, Lord Malak.
Calo has agreed to help us capture the young Bastila for a very hefty fee, of course. But I assure you he is well worth the price. His reputation as a bounty hunter is well earned.
Her companions are nothing to me, Calo. But I desire the young Jedi taken alive, if at all possible.
Lord Malak, forgive me, there is something else. May we have a private audience away from the ears of the common soldiers?
I trust you are not wasting my time, Admiral Karath.
I promise you will be very interested in what Calo has to tell you about Bastila's other companions, Lord Malak.
Anchorhead, one of the first settlements on Tatooine and the largest city on the planet, welcomed Avner and Bastila with the sweltering embrace of twin suns. As they stepped onto its dusty streets, the Force stirred within them once more, unveiling a vision. The Force revealed a star map, buried in a cave and cloaked in the mists of forgotten history. Tatooine was a harsh, sparsely populated world. Its scattered settlements were dwarfed by endless stretches of searing desert. The heat was unrelenting, the creatures beyond the city walls deadly, and the sea of dunes stretched so far it seemed to devour the horizon. Finding the star map here would be no simple task. No sooner had they disembarked than a representative of the Zerka Corporation approached them. One of the galaxy's most powerful conglomerates, Zerka had its grip firmly planted in both Republic and Sith-controlled territories. Avner, careful not to attract unwanted attention, took the chance to gather information. He learned two things of note. First, the planet was home to seasoned hunters, many of whom were intimately familiar with Tatooine's unforgiving terrain. And second, Zerka's mining operations extended even into the most remote corners of the desert, granting them access to places few dared to tread. The duo sought out the hunters first, but none had heard of any ancient artifact hidden beneath the sands. At Zerka's local outpost, the response was just as vague. Still, the Zerka officials made a proposal. If the Jedi could deal with the native Sand people and put an end to the attacks, Zerka would offer their support. Avner had no intention of leading a massacre, and yet time was slipping through their fingers. Malak would not sit idle while they searched caves and chased myths, but neither could he justify slaughtering an entire tribe. There had to be another way. He left the conversation open-ended, promising only that he would help stop the raids. How exactly? That remained unsaid. With permission to venture beyond the city limits secured, he stepped once more into the scorched streets of Anchorhead, Bastila silently falling in step beside him. As they made their way to a trader's shop to procure supplies, Avner noticed Bastila walking in silence, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. He paused, turning toward her, and gently asked if something weighed on her mind. She admitted she had been observing him. She was surprised by how naturally he carried himself, as if he had been a Jedi for years. And then, there was that strange bond between them. She could feel it growing stronger with each passing day. To her surprise, Avner smiled, genuinely and with a rare warmth that softened his usually measured demeanor. He asked whether she was watching him as a Jedi, or for some other reason.
That is you. Why must you be so impossibly infuriating? You know very well what I am really talking about. I am referring to the bond between us, the one the Jedi Council spoke of.
Avner offered a quiet apology for teasing her, though the amused glint in his eyes lingered. The tension between them remained, but it had shifted into something quieter, something unspoken. Their moment was shattered by the sudden arrival of Sith troops sweeping through the streets with a singular objective, capturing Bastila Shan. Malak's forces were relentless, but they were no match for two Jedi. In a swift and brutal exchange of blows, the Sith fell. Without looking back, Avner and Bastila pressed forward, leaving their fallen pursuers behind. Inside the trader's shop, something unusual caught Avner's attention, a droid unlike any he had encountered. Its frame was bulky and battle-worn, covered in rust, scratches, and impact marks that hinted at a long and violent history. But what intrigued Avner most was not the droid's design, it was its demeanor. While it had treated the merchant with gruff suspicion, the droid regarded Avner with unexpected enthusiasm. Its posture straightened, its photoreceptors glowed slightly brighter. It was eager, almost too eager. There was something strange in its speech patterns as well, as though each word was measured, but laced with quiet threat.
It is sufficient to say that I am a fully capable translator and cultural analyst, and I am also proficient in personal combat.
With a raised brow, Avner inwardly remarked on the absurdity of it all. So this eager-to-please protocol unit was not only a fluent translator, but also a seasoned killer with a broken memory core.
Answer: indeed. I am most eager to engage in some unadulterated violence. At your command, of course, Master. Statement: I wish only to be purchased and away from ill treatment at the hands of this poorly skilled mechanic. I have no desire to be subtle. Qualification: oh, of course I shall be quite pleasant to you should you purchase me, please.
After a moment's consideration, Avner made his decision. HK-47 mastery of alien languages would be vital in any diplomatic efforts with the Sand people, and his combat proficiency could prove a potent asset against Sith forces. And yet, as he looked at the droid, something faint stirred deep within him. There was no reason for it, no memory to explain the strange sense of recognition, and yet, Avner couldn't shake the feeling that he had just found something, or someone, he'd once lost. Without further hesitation, Avner purchased the eccentric machine and left the shop, ready to venture into the wastelands. But they hadn't gone far before trouble found them. Shortly after leaving Anchorhead, the group was ambushed by Tusken raiders. The attack was aimed at a group of stranded Zerka miners. Avner and his companions intervened, driving the Tuskens back and following the trail from which they had come. The journey that followed was long and unforgiving. Under the blazing suns, they marched across endless dunes, the desert offering no comfort, only silence and sand. The heat gnawed at their strength. Wind howled across the flats, scouring everything in fine grit. And still, they pressed on, guided by HK-47 and the clues gathered from the ambush site. Eventually, they stumbled upon a hidden encampment nestled among the dunes. Through HK-47, Avner made his intent clear. He had not come for violence. He sought an audience with the leader of the tribe. After a long, intense silence, the chieftain emerged. His face was concealed behind layers of fabric and years of mistrust. His gaze lingered on Avner, weighing him. Then, he spoke. He wished to move his people deeper into the desert, far from Anchorhead, far from bloodshed, but he could not. They lacked the moisture harvesters necessary to survive in the harsh interior. Avner did not argue, nor did he try to negotiate. He simply nodded and turned back toward the direction they had come. The trek back to Anchorhead was unforgiving. Winds had shifted since they last passed, and the dunes had changed shape. Visibility dropped. Even HK-47 guidance faltered at times, but step by step, they endured. When they finally returned to the city, their robes were soaked in sweat, their boots filled with sand. At Zerka's outpost, Avner acquired the needed harvesters and made the long journey back across the desert once more. The chieftain was stunned. No outsider had ever returned twice through the Dune Sea, and yet here stood Avner, dust-covered, exhausted, but resolute. True to his word, the chieftain called off the raids, and in a gesture of rare trust, he offered Avner something far more valuable than weapons or territory: knowledge. A history passed down through oral tradition, hidden from the outsiders for centuries. The storyteller of the Sand People spoke to his guests of their ancestors, of how they once ruled lands green and vast, of the invaders who came from the stars, of battles lost, and identities forged in fire and survival. And then he spoke of a legend, a tale so old even the elders whispered it with reverence. Before the deserts, before the sandstorms, Tatooine had been a world of oceans and verdant life. That changed with the orbital bombardment unleashed by the Rakata Empire, a punishment that scorched the surface and turned the planet into an endless sea of sand. When Avner and Bastila heard the chieftain mention the ancient conquerors, they pressed him without hesitation. In response, the Tusken elder handed them a weathered map marking the location of a long-forgotten Rakata temple. Before leaving, by chance, or perhaps the will of the Force, the group came across Griff, Mission's long-lost brother. Years ago, in one of his many doomed get-rich schemes, he had abandoned her on Taris without a second thought. Avner negotiated for his release, and the crew brought him back safely. But the truth cut deeper than any blade. Griff hadn't changed. He was still the same spineless schemer, leeching off Mission's loyalty for his own gain. That revelation hurt. And yet, despite the disappointment, Mission remained quietly grateful to Avner for trying, for caring, and for giving her the closure she never thought she'd get. With their time in the camp drawing to a close, the crew of the Ebon Hawk made a choice. To cover more ground, and perhaps hasten their discovery of the star map, they would split up, each taking a different path through the desert. Juhani, Mission, and Zalba headed northwest, toward the cliffs that bordered the Dune Sea. Meanwhile, Avner, accompanied by Bastila and Canderous, set their course for the eastern reaches of the desert, following the directions offered by the Tusken chieftain. HK stayed behind on the ship with Karth and T3-M4 just in case things went wrong. Instead of bringing the droid, Avner chose Canderous. His Mandalorian roots and experience navigating harsh worlds like Tatooine made him a valuable asset, but as it soon became clear, he was also a volatile one. As the trio pressed deeper into the dunes, Avner found himself regretting the decision to leave HK behind, because the tension between Canderous and Bastila crackled in the air like static, always one spark away from open conflict.
So, Bastila, I heard a rumor that the Vulkars captured you without much of a struggle. It must be embarrassing to be bested by a handful of street thugs.
There were extenuating circumstances, and I can assure you, it took far more than a handful of Vulkars to subdue me.
Whatever you say. All I know is that if we had more Jedi like Bastila fighting against us in the Mandalorian Wars, my side might not have lost.
Bold talk from a broken-down mercenary who is serving at Davik's heel. I'd call you his pet cat-hound, but they have enough loyalty not to turn on their masters.
Insults? Maybe if your master had trained your lightsaber to be as quick as your tongue, you could have escaped those Vulkars, you spoiled little Jedi princess.
I was not spoiled. I was given the same training as everyone else in the Order. You are nothing but No, I must not do this. There is no emotion. There is peace.
That's the problem with you Jedi. Always chanting about peace and control. Never up for a good fight. Well, except for Revan, I guess.
Avner was not one to lose his temper easily, but the heat, the exhaustion, and the relentless arguing had worn him down. When he finally spoke, his patience was clearly spent. He didn't shout, but there was an edge to his voice that cut deeper than anger. He ordered them to stand down, reminded them of their mission, and warned that the desert had little patience for personal squabbles. Days passed beneath the punishing suns, sand, heat, and wind, with only the occasional shadow of circling beasts high above. But then, the dunes shifted. On the horizon, jagged shapes broke the monotony of the desert. As they drew closer, the yawning mouth of a massive cave came into view, half consumed by time and sand. The star map was inside, but so was the deadliest creature on all of Tatooine. A krayt dragon had claimed the cavern as its lair, a beast of myth made flesh, towering, sinewed, armored in scales thick as durasteel. Its roar cracked across the canyon like thunder. And not far from the cave, they spotted a familiar Twi'lek, his hands wrapped around a hunting rifle as he studied the krayt dragon's lair with wary focus. Avner remembered Fortuna, a hunter he had once spoken to in Anchorhead. The man had spent years chasing legends, dreaming of a dragon pearl, and now their paths crossed again. Together, they formed a plan. A herd of banthas was driven toward the cave, and when the krayt dragon emerged, enraged and ravenous, Fortuna detonated the trap. Explosives planted around the entrance erupted in a thunderous blast. The beast's death cry echoed for miles before its colossal body slumped to the ground. Fortuna approached the corpse in silence. He ran his hand over the still warm scales and gave Avner the dragon pearl without hesitation. To him, the glory had been in the hunt, not the prize. The use of mines and borrowed strength had rendered the pearl unearned, and so he passed it on freely, satisfied with nothing but the chase. The group descended into the darkness. Beneath layers of stone and ancient dust, they uncovered the second star map, its markings faintly glowing as though pulsing with memory. With new coordinates in hand, they prepared to return to the Ebon Hawk. But fate was not done with them. At the mouth of the cavern, a familiar silhouette awaited, Kalo Nord. Cloaked in dust, twin blasters drawn, his presence radiated menace. He had positioned his men across the ridge, surrounding the Jedi from a distance. His plan was clear: strike fast, keep them out of reach, and overwhelm them with fire. But what he didn't know, what he underestimated, was how much Avner had learned. Canderous had often spoken of the Mandalorian Wars during their hyperspace jumps, tactics, ambushes, the art of controlled chaos, and now, all of it came back. While Kalo made threats, boasting of revenge for Taris and mocking their impending deaths, Avner and Canderous subtly readied a pair of grenades. Timing was key. As Kalo drew breath to finish his threat, two explosives arced through the air. The blast tore through the bounty hunters' ranks, throwing them off balance and tearing their formation apart. In a single leap, aided by the Force, Avner closed the distance, slamming into the nearest mercenary with a flash of his saber. Behind him, Bastila hurled her weapon in a deadly arc, while Canderous laid down suppressive fire with cold precision. Kalo fought back with lethal skill, both blasters spitting bolts with terrifying speed, but Avner stood firm, deflecting each shot with practiced resolve. The battle raged, but the tide turned. Eventually, Kalo Nord fell, and with his death, silence returned to the canyon. Breathing heavily, Canderous gave Avner a brief nod. No words, just the silent respect of a warrior. Few days later, back in Anchorhead, Avner met with Zerka's representative one final time. Their assistance was no longer needed. The Sand People had honored their word. The raids had ceased. Zerka's questions were met with polite indifference. Their suspicions were deflected without effort. Avner and Bastila walked out in silence. Altogether, the crew had spent just over 2 weeks on Tatooine. As they neared the bustling spaceport and the familiar silhouette of the Ebon Hawk, Bastila called out to Avner. There was something in her voice, measured but uneasy. Despite the success of the mission, she looked troubled. She warned him of the dark side. More than once, she said, he had come dangerously close to crossing the line. He had acted with conviction, even righteousness. But so had Revan, and so had Malak.
I've seen how you've resisted many temptations and continued to walk the path of the light side. Very commendable. But I'm afraid you might stray from this path. You need to see what the dark side represents in its entirety. For it is what we battle. Only the wisdom of a Jedi Master can truly explain this. But I will do my best to make you understand. The dark side is not simply giving in to anger, temptation, or to use the Force to destructive ends. These things only lead to the dark side. The dark side grows stronger and more insidious the closer you draw to it. It begs you to surrender to it, to release all its terrible power, and it becomes harder and harder to resist. And once you stop resisting, it's too late. It twists you up inside and turns you into a mockery of everything you once stood for.
Avner frowned, uncertain. He didn't understand why she chose this moment, or why her words felt like more than a warning. He remained silent, turning her words over in his mind, and she offered no further explanation. But before either of them spoke, a young Twi'lek girl approached them. She paused, confused, then apologized, saying she had mistaken Bastila for someone else. A woman named Helena. Something shifted in Bastila's expression. First confusion, then realization. Her mother was here. She stood still, caught between instinct and memory. Avner could tell she wasn't sure whether to walk away or confront the past. Sensing her hesitation, he gently stepped in, not as a Jedi, but as a friend. He offered to arrange the meeting himself. She didn't agree, didn't argue, but didn't stop him either. When they met, the air was thick with tension. The words between mother and daughter came sharp, heavy with old pain. Bastila's voice shook with accusation. She blamed Helena for sending her to the Jedi Order without a proper goodbye to her father, for choosing the Order over family, for loving the comforts her father's work had brought but not the man himself. Helena listened, and when Bastila demanded to know where her father was, she finally answered. He was gone. Killed just days ago, chasing the pearl of a great dragon, the same one they had slain. The grief hit hard. Bastila's voice rose. She didn't want to hear excuses. She accused Helena of pushing him to risk his life. She didn't let her speak. Not until Avner intervened. His tone was steady, but there was weight behind it. Maybe there was more to this story. Maybe her father made that choice for a reason. That's when Helena finally spoke. She was dying. The illness had taken root long ago. There was no cure, not one they could afford. Her husband's final hope had been the pearl. If he could sell it, maybe there'd be enough for treatment. Maybe not, but it was something. Avner didn't hesitate. He reached into his pack, pulled out the pearl, and placed it in her hands. Bastila stood in silence. Her eyes brimmed with emotion, but her voice was even as she pulled a pouch of credits from her robe. She handed it to her mother and told her to go to Coruscant to seek help. And then, softly, she added that she hoped they would meet again, if the war allowed it. When Helena left the cantina, Avner turned to Bastila. He asked softly how she was, if she was feeling better after meeting with her mother.
Yes, that brought me a lot of peace. More than I thought it would have. Thank you for urging me toward it. After all my training, I would have thought it would have been easier. Apparently, I still have much to learn.
Their time on Tatooine had come to an end. As the crew prepared for liftoff, Avner stood for a moment at the edge of the loading ramp, his eyes scanning the dunes one last time. Tatooine had seemed dead at first glance, just rock, sand, and silence. But beneath its scorched surface lay buried wars, broken promises, forgotten histories, and people still clinging to all of it. Not everything lost to the desert was gone. Some things merely waited, to be remembered, to be understood. And maybe that was the real lesson this world offered. Then without a word, he turned and stepped aboard the Ebon Hawk. The rest of the crew was already aboard, shaking the sand from their gear and their thoughts. They shared what they had seen and plotted a new course, toward the shadowed forests of Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, and the place Zalbar once called home. And this is where I would like to wrap up the retelling of the first part and say one important thing. If this video got you even a little interested in the game, don't hesitate to give it a try, even if you already know parts of the story. Because I have left a lot out and there is still a huge portion of the game ahead of you. Plus, depending on your choices, some events might play out differently. And while the overall structure stays mostly the same up to a certain point, the feeling of being immersed in the story won't go anywhere. Trust me on that. Because while I can retell the story, what makes KOTOR truly unforgettable is experiencing it yourself, making those choices and shaping your own path. And honestly, what matters just as much to me is finding out how this video actually did. Comments and likes not only help me understand what worked and what didn't, and they also help promote the video and support the channel overall. And for now, I wish you all a good morning, day, evening, or night. Till next time.